wherever you are and whenever you are. Welcome, good souls of the planet and beyond, to Paranormal Now. I'm Alan B. Smith. Join us as we traverse the cosmic highway of paranormal portals and tantalizing turnoffs. Our first hour guest, and only first hour guest tonight, is KGRA's very own host of Acceleration Radio, L.A. Marzulli. And we will indeed be on the trail of the Nephilim, particularly in Peru. So stretch that brain cavity and keep an open mind. This is going to be a fun one. Please share your thoughts and experiences with us, as always, during or after the show on Facebook.com/ParanormalNowRadio, Twitter @Paranormal_Now, and join us in the KGRA chat room where you can pose your questions, join the conversation, and just become a part of the family here. Also, if you could take a moment to check out my YouTube channel called Paranormal Pop and subscribe and press the notification bell for new UFO-related content that will be rolling out very soon. So just go to youtube.com/paranormalpop. My goal is to reach 500 subscribers by the end of June, so I'd really, really appreciate your support, whether you share, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, comment down below, whatever. If we can generate some activity and some additional subscribers, that'd be really appreciated. Lines will not be open tonight. We are doing a 1-hour special with L.A. Marzulli. L.A. Marzulli is an author, lecturer, and filmmaker. He has penned 12 books, including the Nephilim trilogy, which made the CBA bestsellers list. He received an honorary doctorate for the series from his mentor, Dr. Ide Thomas, who was the provost at Pacific International University. He was also honored with the Gold Medallion Award from Chuck Missler at the K-House Conference in 2014. His series on the Trail of the Nephilim 1 and 2 are full-color, oversized books which uncover startling evidence that there has been a massive cover-up of what he believes are the remains of the Nephilim, the giants mentioned in the Bible. LA is also host of Acceleration Radio on KGRA. His website is lamarzulli.net. Welcome, LA.
Hey, great to be here, Alan. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. So look, we're going to do a straight hour. We have no interruption in this hour. It's just you and me. And I did mention to you earlier that we are planning a trip to go to Peru. So a lot of my focus is moving towards that direction. Obviously, you spent time down there looking at the Paracas skulls, the elongated skulls around the world. So I'm just curious, right off the bat, do you think that those elongated skulls, or some of the elongated skulls down there, are in fact Nephilim of old, or are those actually ancient aliens?
Really good question. And I actually have the film done. It'll be number 6 in the On the Trail of the Nephilim series. Mm-hmm. The first 3 deal with the Mound Builders, and 4 is America's Stonehenge Part 1, which is right here in the Americas, and of course 5 is Part 2 of that. But the DNA on the elongated skulls is finished, is ready to go. But I've got samples that are being cooked up in a lab right now, and so I put a hold on the film. I'll release it later this year, and I'm hoping to get some more data before I release the film. But let me say this, that we have medical doctors, surgeons, optometrists, chiropractors, people of letters, different disciplines, examine one-to-one casts that were created by Joe Taylor, who's also right here on KGRA, and one-to-one casts, and they all come on the record, look right at the camera, and say, this skull is not the result of cranial deformation or cradle headboarding. Mm-hmm. Take an infant's head and wrap it to shape it. It's not. It's genetic. It's genetic. And that's what I'm sticking with. That's what I believe. We also know that our DNA research, which, by the way, our team, to the best of my knowledge, is so far the only team that had multiple samples that actually sequenced, and we got mitochondrial DNA. showing a Middle Eastern/European haplogroup, which that means that these skulls, wherever they are, whatever you may think, did not originate in Peru. They originated in the Middle East and in Europe. Now, not all of them, but many of them did. And that rewrites history. Of course, mainstream archaeologists won't even look at the data. There was an archaeologist overseas in a country which I won't mention, so I can give him or her allow them to keep their anonymity. I sent them, here's what the data showed. 56 samples, 28 of them sequenced. Out of the 28, many of them pointed to Middle Eastern/European haplogroups. That rewrites history. If it was contamination, then we would see my DNA. We would have nuclear DNA. There was no contamination. We took my DNA and Mando Gonzalez, our lead archaeologist. We were in lab suits that were provided by Paleo DNA Lab up in Canada, literally head to toe. We've got film of all this. We show it. We took extra precautions. In fact, some people actually applauded us for our diligence in covering up and making sure there was no contamination. Chase Klotsky, again, thanks to KGRA, Chase Klotsky was our field forensic tag and bagger, for lack of a better word. So she tagged and bagged everything for us. And then we had 3 different labs. We did a Paleo DNA lab up in Canada, and we also did UCLA, and then another lab which does not want their name mentioned because they're afraid of the research. Gee, I wonder why. So why is science afraid of the truth? Why is science so afraid that they'll go to extra lengths to cover things up, or just to yell and scream and say, oh, it was contaminated, when how many samples do we have to take and sequence before the scientific community goes, oh, well, maybe it wasn't contaminated. Maybe they're onto something. Maybe these elongated skulls were, in fact, not cranial deformation, the result of cranial deformation or cranial headboarding. Maybe they are, in fact, genetic. And if they are, and the haplogroup points to a Middle Eastern origin, then we believe that what we might be looking at, might be looking at, is the remnants of the Anakim, which means long necks. Because in order to balance these elongated skulls with the position of the foramen magnum, it would necessitate a much longer neck. Same vertebra, but like a giraffe has the same number of vertebrae that a human being does. But they're larger, and the spaces between them are stretched out, no pun intended. So could we be looking at the remnants of the Anakim? Anakim is one of the Nephilim tribes listed in the biblical narrative, which translates as long necks. And we think that that's a viable position. That's our hypothesis. More testing needs to be done, which is why we're on the trail.
There was, I can't remember now, there was a museum, I remember in one of your videos you were visiting, and they had closed off a section that, do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah, that was the Julio Teo Museum.
Julio Teo? Okay.
Yeah, which was under construction at the time. We thought that they were just completely closing everything down. What they had done in the interim is they created this beautiful museum which focused on the Paracas elongated skulls. But of course, they only have one paradigm, and that is to show that all these skulls were cranial deformed, cranial headboarded. And we're saying, and in fact, in the DNA film, we show what the difference between a cradle headboarded skull is and one that's genetic. We show that in the film. We show a skull that was presented to us up in Vancouver Island in a private collection, which was elongated through cranial deformation. We show that. Well, guess what? The foramen magnum hasn't been moved at all. In fact, the foramen magnum is exactly where it should be. It's just that they've elongated the skull. The skulls in Paracas, the foramen magnum, which is the brain hole where your spinal column connects to the base of the skull, moved all the way to the posterior of the skull. If it's any further back, and we show in the film, it's the first time it's ever been filmed that I'm aware of, we show the very enigmatic Chongos elongated skull. We show that. And in that film, Mondo says in Spanish, turn it over, turn it over. And we roll the skull over for the first time on film, and that foramen magnum is so far to the posterior of the skull. If it's any further back, it's outside the skull, literally. It's like right on the the furthest part of the skull you could possibly go to. So that in itself is just, when I saw that, you hear me go, oh my gosh, it's all the way in the back. You hear me on film say that.
Yeah. Knowing our own physiology, how does that work? How could that possibly work?
Well, it doesn't, and that's why we're looking at an entirely different species. We have medical doctor after surgeon and all these different people in the film come on the record and just basically look at the camera and say that these are another species. We're looking at another species of human being. That's what they are, and that's what the Nephilim are. They're part watcher angel, part human. And that's what we think these are. That's our hypothesis, but doggone it, they're not human as we know them. They're definitely not human. And we also discovered something about them, which no one has ever talked about, that we believe that these entities were nocturnal. We had an optometrist look at the skull. And I'm giving you we haven't gone public with this stuff because it's in the film. But
exclusive information right here?
Pretty much. That the optometrist stated that based on the orbits of the eye sockets, these eyes were 20 to 30% larger than a human. The pupils were spaced much closer together than a human. It's all wrong. Alan, it's absolutely all wrong. And this is why we are saying that it's some sort of a different human being. Why not the Nephilim?
How many of these types of skulls are in other institutions that have the financial resources, whether it be universities or national museums, have other skulls like this that could do the studies or the work that you're doing, and aren't?
Oh, they're everywhere. I mean, I was talking to Maria Wheatley in England, and I know that she has access to some of the skulls that were found in the long barrows.
Yeah.
But everything is kept under lock and key. How dare you want to even look at these things? So, these universities control the narrative. The reason why we went down to Peru is because you can handle this stuff. You can't do that up here. I mean, you literally, you can't. I went to UCLA, and I was able to go in to their back room, and they've got part of the Glidden collection, but everything there was Native American. There's no doubt about it. It was all Native American. In other words, everything had been sanitized. But meanwhile, I found the picture of Ralph Glidden, and that's my picture, my discovery. We had it analyzed, showing a 9-footer. And other skeletons on Catalina with 6 fingers, which all point back to the origin of the Nephilim. So, I mean, we were at the Lovelock Museum, and they've got elongated skulls there. Now, they may have been moved. They used to be in the back room, and the former curator used to show them to people. And we've got photographs of those, and they were in book On the Trail of the Nephilim. Yeah, they're there, Alan. I mean, there's no doubt about it. They're there, and we know they are. Just like over in Europe, the same thing. It's everywhere. There was just, and they'll show these things from time to time. It'll come up in some article, and they immediately go, oh, what we're looking at is cranial deformation. You people are just talking out your hats. They never show you the underside of a skull. And archaeologists and anthropologists are just parroting what they learned in school. No one's examining these things. Our team, and this is the work of Rick Woodward, our anthropologist on the team, was the first anthropologist, to the best of my knowledge, ever to point out that, wait a minute, folks, the foramen magnum is in a totally different place than where it should be. That's genetic. That's genetic. And Rick comes on record in the DNA film and expounds on this, which is just absolutely incredible.
Have there not been any documentaries along the lines of something like Nova, where they've done genetic testing or on-camera research besides what you guys have done?
There was one film company that was out of London that went to a skeleton called the Waikiki skeleton in Peru. And Brian Forrester was instrumental, I think, in setting some of this up. But he may or may not have been. I don't know. But I'm pretty sure Brian had his hand in that. And I don't know, I've been trying to track down, because that's fallen off the map. But they did genetic testing, and they discovered that the female, or the mitochondrial, was human, but the nuclear DNA, which they were able to obtain, was an unknown primate. Unknown primate. That rewrites history.
Yeah, so not being a geneticist, an unknown primate, does that mean that the genes or DNA is telling you exactly that this is cannot be other than a species created here on Earth? Or does that mean that there's a chance that somehow the DNA is just different enough that maybe there is a chance that there could be genetic splicing or something else going on within that?
Your guess is as good as mine.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I would be, if I answer that, it's conjecture.
Mm-hmm.
What I find intriguing is that all of this ties into Sasquatch, believe it or not, what's going on there, the DNA which is taken, the sperm which is taken from abductees, the ovum which is taken from abductees, the hybrid beings which we've documented. We know they exist. Dr. David Jacobs' book, They're Walking Among Us. We've got people on the record in one of my films, UFOs Are Real, in their own words, talking about these hybrid entities. So this has been going on for centuries. And the reason why is when you go back to the biblical narrative and you read that the dragon's offspring will be at enmity with the offspring of the woman. That sets up the rest of the biblical narrative. It's a seed war. And that's what we see happening over and over and over again.
The haploid group, now, is there any chance that they could have migrated over land? Would that, is that within the realm of possibility? Because obviously we know that humans did migrate into South America, Central and South America, but that's a different genetic group. Could this have been a random pocket, or they've come by sea, or what do you think?
The Paracas people show up on the shores of Paracas roughly 3,000 years ago. And I remember talking to Brian Forrester about this years ago. And he said, yeah, we're kind of stumped. We thought they got over here much earlier, but testing seems to prove that they show up about 3,000 years ago. And I looked at him and said, well, that fits the timeline of my hypothesis perfectly. And he was taken aback by that statement, because our hypothesis, my hypothesis, has always been that about 3,500 years ago, with the so-called conquest of the Canaanites, the conquest of the Promised Land by Joshua and Caleb and the Israelites, which took place 3,500 years ago, the Nephilim tribes are populating the area. They're all through there. And this is why the mandate comes down to destroy them. And this is a 3-hour conversation, which we don't have time for. But the bottom line is, we believe that there was a diaspora of these tribes as Joshua and Caleb pressed the conquest, pressed the war. And what we see is a migration out of the Promised Land into Cyprus, into Sardinia, into Malta, or Malta to Sardinia, and then to Minorca, and then southern Spain, and then Portugal, and then up to the UK, and then finally over to the New World. We also believe that you can take, and Thor Heyerdahl proved this in his film Raw, and we show this in my film, America Stonehenge, the Canaanite connection, and we show that Thor Heyerdahl built a papyrus boat, sailed out the pillars from the Rockers of Gibraltar, pillars of Hercules, just set his sail, no compass, and the trade winds blew him to the island of Barbados. That's the New World. We know it can be done. You can also go out the Red Sea and come over that way. So, all this, in my opinion, we are looking at the fingerprints of the supernatural.
Don't you think that historians now are really coming to terms with the fact that there were much more advanced seafaring civilizations long past? I think they're starting to accept that, don't you?
One would hope so. But the prevailing paradigm in academia is that of isolationism. I'm an ardent diffusionist. An isolationist believes that things move very slowly. Cultures don't shift, they don't move, they don't set sail. They're not interested. They just stay in one place for a long, long time. And there's very little movement. Diffusionist, of which, paradigm I uphold, human beings are curious. Where does this river go? Gee, that looks like a really broad sea. Let's build a boat and go and see where it goes. What's over this mountain? Gee, I've been in this valley all my life, but you know what? There's a mountain there, and if I go over the mountain, what's under there? What's over there? So they've been at war, these two ideologies, two paradigms, diffusionism and isolationism, since the founding of modern anthropology, modern-day archaeology. And if you go through the system, you become an isolationist. Now, they're starting to rethink things. I mean, Graham Hancock's book, America Before, I find very interesting, and I concur with a lot of his findings. He talks about the Great Serpent Mound. I've been there numerous times, and we both agree that this thing is far older than what archaeologists are saying, and Native Americans did not build it. We've got on record Chief Wallace of the Shawnee telling on record that, no, the Shawnee did not build the Serpent Mound. It was here when we got here. But modern-day anthropologists and archaeologists insist that the Shawnee built it. So who's the real racist? Not me. They are. The academics are, because they won't believe the oral tradition of the Shawnee. Somehow their word isn't good enough. They're saying, no, we didn't do this. It was here when we got here. And so modern-day academics say that Native Americans built the mounds, but they just forgot that they had done so.
Well, but my understanding and the reason why there's doubt among mythological stories passed down is that, and now I don't know how true this is, but are you familiar with myths that were told by Native Americans about the creation of the horse as a gift to them from the gods type of thing? And because of that, mythologists say, aha, proof that, we apply these stories to explain the world around us, and that's all they are. There's no real historical truth based in those stories. Well, I mean, because we know the colonists brought the horses.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get where you're going with all this, and in part I do agree. There's mythos, but Native Americans from Maine to California talk about fighting red hair, six-fingered, cannibalistic giants. They all taught. It's all on the record. So all of them are lying. All of them are making this up.
Right.
They all have the same common history. That's nonsense. Red-haired, six-fingered, cannibalistic giants roam the Americas.
Well, and then we find out that there are red-haired people down in, at least in South America and in North America.
Exactly. So all we've done is go where the evidence takes us.
Mm-hmm.
And like with the DNA evidence that we found in Peru, the DNA lab has no dog in the hunt, no Nephilim dog in the hunt. They could care less what my worldview is. And that's why I take great umbrage with the fact that the academics immediately, it's all contaminated. No, it's not. It's not contaminated at all. How many samples do we need before you will actually, get off your ivory tower and take a real look at this stuff?
Yeah, why not do it yourself as well? I mean,
prove it
in the game, sure, yeah.
And no one does. They just poo-poo it. And the people of Peru really drive me nuts because they don't do anything. They just shuffle paper around, with all due respect, and make it almost impossible for you to do anything. It took my team 3 years to get the proper permits to just go down and extract the DNA. And then they pull, you've got a 30-day window to do it. Huh? What? So everybody has to rearrange their schedule for this 30-day window, and we did. But airfare and everything else and hotels and, come on. And we did that. And we did the extraction.
You were mentioning six fingers. So when one is looking for evidence of either an alternative, or I should say, extended family member, new family member of hominid family tree, or an extraterrestrial, right? Are you looking for six fingers? Are you looking for specific anomalies that would help signal to you that there's something really interesting here?
Absolutely. When I was on the island of Catalina, and I was in the archives, I was looking at photographs which had already been looked at, cataloged, put in plastic sleeves, put in manila envelopes, and stuffed in museum boxes. And I'm in there with my lens. I'm looking for six fingers. I'm looking for elongated skulls. I'm looking for giants. I found all three. And it's all published in my book, On the Trail of the Nephilim, Volume 1 and Volume 2. And then the museum took the picture that I found with Ralph Glidden leaning on a shovel, and in front of him is a very large skeleton in situ. We proved by three different analysts that skeleton was just under 9 feet. That's a giant. Just under 9 feet.
LA, where's the best place for people who are listening to check out the evidence and these documents and such? I mean, your website is lamarzulli.net. Is there a specific page where people should go to?
I'm not sure if that information is on there or not. I really don't know. I know that we've got some pictures, but the book, On the Trail of the Nephilim, Volume 1 and 2, is over 600 pages, plus it's got the DNA results. It's very extensive. Full color. It's not black and white. It's full color, and it's 8.5 by 11. So it's an oversized book, over 600 pages, over 300 full color photos. And you can get that by going to lamarzulli.net and curl up and spend the week reading and studying.
How could you get peer reviewed? Can you get published?
I'm not really interested in that.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. I mean, I'm not accredited, so I'll never be part of their club. I just won't be. They'll never accept me in their club. And that's fine. I get that. But I just keep doing what I'm doing. And eventually, I think truth will prevail. I would like to think that truth would prevail. Yeah. And in some circles, it already has. I mean, I get a lot of emails from people, some academics, stating that while they can't come on the record, they've examined my work and they think I'm onto something. And that keeps me on the trail. That keeps me going.
Yeah. One thing I can definitely say, yes, I believe that ancient civilizations were much more advanced and widespread and interconnected, continental interconnected. Than, I think that we can all agree on that, whether you're an ancient alien theorist, Nephilim biblical theorist, or a little more conservative, and or someone like Graham Hancock, who doesn't want to necessarily go down the paranormal path in that regard. Right. But it's something that we can all agree on because there's just too many anomalies. So when you're digging something up, or when you're visiting a museum and you're looking for those signs, is there a correlation between six fingers and elongated skull with red hair, or can you have the elongated skull and not have six fingers and just otherwise look human? Are there certain traits that have to go together?
That's a really good question, and there's not enough data to really weigh in on that conclusively. I'll say this. On Catalina, we found evidence of six fingers. We found elongated skulls. But on one of the giants that was just under 9 feet, he had six fingers, but the skull was not elongated. The other skull, which is now the classic one where Ralph Glidden is standing, and we know he was 5'8", it doesn't have a very elongated skull, but it's got an enormous skull, an enormous head on that thing. And that was on the Vieira brothers' show, In Search of the Lost Giants. Down in Peru, it seems to be different. They're not giants, although I've had Huacaros tell me that they've seen giants. This is like, it goes back 20 or 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. But they exhumed giants down there. 10, 12 feet, that's what I was told by the Huacaros. So we also know that there were two giant, that they were called the gold mummies, which they used to be able to see in Lima. Mm-hmm. You go there, it's all, no one remembers it. It's been scrubbed from the internet. There are no pictures of it, but there were two 9-footers sitting on golden thrones in Lima at the Gold Museum years ago. Somebody's got to have pictures of it. But like the hidden city in Syria, which this goes back, I think, to 1842. Let me just go check the date. But this goes back a long time ago. Mm-hmm. And I thought I had it there, and I guess I don't. That's so weird. But anyway, it's either 1882 or 1842. And there was a pastor who was out in Syria, and he stumbled on this lost city with giant doorways, giant rooms, giant windows. They were cities built for giants. And I remember seeing a video about 10 years ago, maybe longer, where there was a guy in the city showing it. All that's been scrubbed. You can't find anything on it. But there is the one book, which I'm thinking about republishing under my publishing company, because it's, there is no copyright on it anymore, where this guy is out there and he's talking about this stuff. And what's interesting is he knows about the Nephilim, which is really rare for that time period. But he knows about the Nephilim, and he's writing about them. And it corroborates the biblical story. So I find that just really fascinating.
What is your definition of the Nephilim?
The Nephilim is a generic term used for the offspring of a watcher angel, a fallen watcher angel, and the women of earth. That's what it is. And the watcher angels were here thousands of years ago, and they basically contaminated the genome to the point where basically there was almost nothing human left. So, we can believe the narrative or we can laugh at it, but I believe in it, and I think
it sounds almost like kind of like an interpretation, whereas you're saying the genome was disturbed or muddied or made toxic in a sense, whereas the Bible makes it sound more like a morality thing. So are you saying that the Bible is kind of saying that it not necessarily just how human beings were behaving, but we were sort of sullied genetically?
Here's the deal. And I was at the Alien Snowfest conference, and I spoke on Saturday night at great length. You could hear a pin drop in the room. And people from the kitchen came out because they had never heard this paradigm before. They don't understand what it is we're looking at. And I'll address it by saying nobody knows what this is and where we are in it. In other words, if the United States of America is analogous to the universe, is planet Earth in Dallas, New York, Miami, North Carolina, someplace? Nobody knows. Nobody knows where we are. Nobody knows what this is, how big it is, where it goes, and who made it. Nobody has any clue. Nobody knows where Alan resides. Nobody. Where does your consciousness reside? Nobody has a clue. There's lots of theories, but nobody knows. You can cut the brain open. There's no little guy in there. So how does consciousness interface with memory? And what are we? And who are we? And how does this little incredible machine that we call a body, how does it interface with our spirit?
Yeah.
And we don't know. Nobody knows. So with that in mind, we have this cosmology, which is in the biblical narrative. And unless you study it and read it, and I remember before I came across the line, I used to think it was just a pile of dead stories. Now I realize that the book is alive, literally, and there's just so many layers to it. You could study one book the rest of your life and never come to its end. And I mean that. This isn't hype. This is not hyperbole. This is reality. We were created by a loving holy God as replacements for the rebellion. There was a rebellion in an unseen realm that happened millennia ago. And this rebellion was led by this character known as the dragon. And the reason why the rebellion happened, he wanted to be worshipped. He wanted to be worshipped. And this led to two wills in the universe. And because the dragon was a created being, the Most High God could have just wiped them all up. He didn't do that. He allowed it to play out. He allowed the whole thing just to play out, to see where it would go. Mm-hmm. Not because of a game, but because it's who he is. It's part of his character, his attributes. So he creates us. We're not the same as the angels. We're completely different. We're something new because he never does anything twice. And he sets us in a place to see, with our free will, whose side we'll be on, who will believe. Unfortunately, our ancestors believed the lies of the dragon. And when we did that, we took on the attributes of the dragon. I.e., when you look at the world today, all we need to do is look at the Unabomber, look at the jihadists, look at what ISIS does, look at the crazy people on the bus, the crazy Palestinian trying to stab people, or on the plane rather. Look at the murder rate on the weekend in Chicago. Why is it that a 4-year-old doesn't have to be taught how to lie? How does a 4-year-old know how to do that? No one teaches a 4-year-old. He just knows. He or she just knows that, oh, I can lie. I can deceive. How does that happen? Where is that stored? Where is that information, processed and all of a sudden come to the forefront? So we took on the dragon code. And when you get to Genesis 3:15, you've got the promise of someone that will come that will crush the dragon's head. Crush the dragon's head. So the offspring of the dragon will be at war with the offspring of the woman. This is prophecy, thousands of years ago. I'll say it again. The offspring, the seed of the dragon, the offspring of the dragon will be at war with the seed, the offspring of the woman. Someone is coming. He will crush the dragon's head. The dragon will bruise his heel.
He being the offspring of the woman.
Correct.
Okay.
This sets up the rest of the biblical narrative. And this is why, if you've never heard that, and if you've never, Alan, you've never looked at it, I'm not trying to put you on the spot here or embarrass you in any way. Please don't misunderstand me. But if you don't understand what that means, then a person has no idea what the rest of the biblical prophetic narrative is about. They have no clue. Absolutely no clue. Because the rest of the Bible which just means book, by the way. Everything stems from that Genesis 3:15 statement. The dragon, the seed of a dragon, will be at enmity, at war with the seed of the woman. He, the one that comes from the seed of the woman, will crush the dragon's head. Once we come to terms with that, we understand that the seed of the dragon manifests on the planet a short time later. When the fallen angels come down, they take women, they go into the women, they create a hybrid being known as the Nephilim, and they basically completely corrupt the genome on the planet, except for 8 souls.
Ellie, I've got two questions for you.
Sure.
One is, in Lima, where can one go to visit a site where giants may have been? Is there anything in that area in Peru?
Yeah, if you go to Pacachama, the Pacachama Pyramid, okay?
Pacachama, okay.
Pacachama Pyramid in Lima. There's a wall, unlike any of the other walls in Pacachama, okay? And it shows the same type of megalithic joinery that we see in Sacsayhuaman.
Yes, okay.
The stones are very much smaller. They're at the bottom course. There's also photography of the same type of stones found in Sacsayhuaman, found on that site, but you can't go there anymore. Mm-hmm. How convenient is that?
Yeah, well, we're planning on going to Sacsayhuaman, so I think that is.
When you go there,
yeah.
When you go to Sacsayhuaman, you are touching the fingerprints of the dragon, in my opinion.
Wow. Okay.
That's what
I also have another question from the KGRA chat room. The question is, how is it that our genome is 97.6 the same as a bonobo, but we are so contaminated by Nephilim DNA that there is practically nothing human left?
No, we're not contaminated by Nephilim DNA. That's the whole point. We're not.
We once were, or our predecessors were. Is that how it goes?
No, they were wiped out. They were wiped out in the flood. That's the whole reason for the flood. Mm-hmm. The Nephilim are on the earth. And
right.
then we see afterward the same judgment. I mean, I've written about this for the last 25 years, for crying out loud. We see the same judgment comes down wherever the Nephilim are present. But there's also a period of time. There's always this like grace period where nothing happens, and all of a sudden, bam! Sodom and Gomorrah is a Nephilim stronghold. The tribes that are in the Levant, when Joshua and Caleb pressed the conquest of Canaan, are Nephilim tribes. I wrote about this all in a book called The Cosmic Chess Match. They're there for a specific reason. I mean, it gets so deep, Alan. It really does, and it gives us an idea. Why does Pharaoh in Egypt wake up on a Monday morning and go, "I want to kill all the male babies of the Israelites"? Why does he do that? Where does that thought come from, and why does he act on it? Why is it that when Jesus is born, Herod goes, "Kill all the infants from 3 years old and down"? Where does that thought come from? Why is he doing it? Because the dragon knows someone will come from the seed of the woman that will crush his head, take his kingdom away from him. This is deep stuff. It's really heavy, heavy stuff. And the moment we plug in the narrative, and see, the problem is people equate this with church. And in some ways it has something to do with church, but in other ways it's completely out of the church. Most of the church doesn't even talk about any of this stuff because they don't know. They don't understand either. Most of the church doesn't understand Genesis 3:15. They have no clue.
One thing that I've discussed quite a bit is I do think that no matter what your denomination or church is, I think that it's only fair to your congregation that you share some of the things you've learned in seminary school, such as different interpretations or different ways of reading the Bible. And that often is not the case. What you get is just your priest or your minister's a personal message to you from what they've learned, and rather there's not a sort of communal discussion about, hey, what could this mean? And I think that's part of what you're talking about there, because we're most of the time just simply told. I was raised Catholic, so I was told this is what this means. This other stuff is a mystery, which is cool, and then that's it.
Yeah, I was raised Catholic also. Mm-hmm. And I've been on both sides of the aisle, Alan. I mean, I was in the New Age. I had spirit guides, literally. I went on vision quests. I was in the ashram for 3 years. My third eye was open. I mean, I did all that. I was there. So I know what that is. And then I had the Paul on the Road to Damascus experience 40 years ago, which changed my life and continues to lead me down this path I'm on, mm-hmm. which is what happened 2,000 years ago in that upper room in Pentecost. That's what changed everything. And that has been, unfortunately, to a greater or lesser extent, obfuscated by the very church that seeks to promulgate it. I remember going to my mom, who passed away a number of years ago, and said, "Mom, would you like to be born from above?" And she goes, "What's that?" Now, this is a woman raised Catholic, in the church, and had no idea of what that was. Had no idea, never heard it before. And so, she lived her entire life without ever having that experience, which was sort of tragic in a way. But I led her to the Lord, and, she died very peacefully. So we're talking about not religion. We're talking about a relationship with the God of the universe. And I remember the first time the Lord spoke to me, not in an audible voice, but he spoke to me. And I just was, oh my gosh, because I've learned in 40 years, I have my own thoughts. I can have thoughts from the enemy, the dragon. And I can have thoughts from the Spirit of a living God. And we learn through walking it out how to discern and differentiate between whose voice. My voice is real easy. I know when it's my imagination. And I've learned the dragon's voice. It's always fear. It's always rush. It's always confusion. But the Spirit of the living God is always centered in peace and never goes against himself. Never.
Does it necessarily matter whether you call it God or the source or spirit? If someone does New Age practices, opens their third eye, like you said you had done, and what if someone does achieve inner peace and a connection with the divine, but just doesn't call it the same thing you or someone else might call it?
Because having been on both sides of the aisle, I asked for projected. I had spirit guides. I know what all that was. This is something completely different. You got to remember that the dragon comes to rob, kill, and destroy. The dragon comes to deceive. And I remember the guru when I finally left Guru Maharaji years and years and years ago, because I realized he was bankrupt, that he was just a human being, just like I was. He had power, but he's going to die, just like I'm going to die, just like his father died before him. And so there's a having been on both sides of the aisle, there's a huge difference between having spirit guides come, automatic writing, astral projecting, all those so-called New Age things, meditation, and the real deal. Because what happens is when he shows up, a lot of the time is to show us who we are, which can be really terrifying. Because sometimes we don't want to look at who we really are.
Right. That's the hardest thing because it's so darn difficult to change when we realize
exactly.
And so yes, I think people are innocently so and not so innocently so willingly ignorant of their own character defects because it's hard, man. It's hard to just get along and go through a regular day. Forget about just trying to hack your own mind and spirit and change your trajectory. But I do want to get, speaking of more broader paranormal things, you had alluded to this, I think, before, but do all roads lead to Bigfoot?
Well, Bigfoot is manifesting, in ways certainly a lot more frequent than Gimli Patterson did. They're all over the place. A gentleman in an undisclosed location sent me a film strip, very quick. It's only on the film for just a few seconds, but I took it in the Final Cut Pro and blew it up, and I just went, oh my gosh. I mean, this thing is huge. And there's one gentleman that I interviewed on my program right here on KGRA Acceleration Radio, and Scott Carpenter, no relation to the astronaut. And Scott was out in the field with these things for 9 years. And he came to the conclusion that, no, it wasn't a skunk ape, it was Nephilim. And, he went in there with a totally open mind. And after 9 years, he realized that there was a supernatural dynamic to these things. And he began to, delve into my work. In fact, he quotes me several times in his book. I helped, construct his paradigm. And he believes, as I do, that Sasquatch, i.e. Bigfoot, are modern-day Nephilim.
So, but here's the thing. Many reports of Bigfoot are not of something evil.
Right.
And so I would like to think of Bigfoot more along the lines of Harry and the Hendersons. That's just, my imagination.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah, but so what if they are the Nephilim or descendants of the Nephilim? Could they be of a different spirit, as it were?
What Scott and I actually addressed this because there's another researcher who also had encounters with these things, and she leans towards Harry and the Hendersons' viewpoint. What it seems like is they're under some kind of, they have like a mandate that they have to uphold. And so not all groups have the same mandate. But you see, there's like, this whole thing is so shrouded in mystery that it's conjecture on our part.
Yeah.
It seems like one group can interact to a degree, but can go no further. And this is what Scott Carpenter believes, that they are literally not allowed to interact with us. They're not allowed to be seen. And he used to carry, when he'd walk in the woods, he learned to carry his camera with not on his backpack, with the lens facing behind him. And that's how he was able to capture a lot of footage with Bigfoot darting in between trees and poking out like that. Because sometimes when you see them, they immediately go into this defensive position. They crouch down and look like a boulder or a tree stump. That's what they do. So look, it's just like the UFO thing, Alan. It's complex. Nobody's got all the answers. I don't either. I just think that the UFO thing, as well as the Sasquatch thing, has a nefarious angle to it, which deeply troubles me.
Yeah. It's interesting. When I was last speaking with Ryan Sprague, he really considered only focusing on UFOs. That was his main point of interest. But he was talking about how he can't seem to help but keep leaning towards the paranormal in his research, and he's become more open to the idea that there's some overlap there. Do you think that there is?
Absolutely. I think that the whole UFO phenomenon, while it may be nuts and bolts, also there's a supernatural component to it. Mm-hmm. These entities manipulate space, time, matter, and energy in ways that confound us, in ways that defy our physics utterly. Mm-hmm. How is that possible? How do they do this? And we don't have answers to that. There's a breeding program that's continued, that goes on, which goes back to the Genesis 3:15 narrative, although it's different, but it's very similar. They are making hybrid beings. We know that. Mm-hmm. I've got people that have encounters with them. So, not a lot, but we're getting reports. So I know what's going on. Dr. Jacobs' research is very thorough in that regard. So something is going on, and it's very, very complex. But I think it's supernatural. I remember when we took out the last implant with Dr. Roger Lear, number 17, and patient 17. And we took the implant out. And by the way, most of that footage is ours in that film, which is on Netflix, and of course our film isn't, but I digress. That's just how the game is played, with absolutely zero credit. You can hear me talking in the film, but they don't tell you who's talking.
Ah, jeez.
Yeah, and the bottom line is we were there and we couldn't find the implant, where 2 weeks prior to that, we had found it in less than a minute. Dr. Matriciani took the wand for the ultrasound machine and found it within a minute right on the guy's leg. We're there for an hour and 15, 20 minutes. We can't find the implant. And I get a tap on my shoulder from my spirit guide, the Spirit of the Living God. And the Spirit of the Living God says, you need to take authority over this and do it now. That's how we roll. That's how it works, okay? And so I go, I'm in a room full of non-believers. They don't believe in what I believe, except for Richard Shaw. And I go, this is going to sound really weird, guys, but I'm going to pray and I'm going to do it now. So without waiting for permission, I just launched into a very quick request. I said, Father, if there are forces which are cloaking this device, I pray that you would break their power and do it soon. Less than 2 minutes, Alan, all of a sudden the implant shows up on the ultrasound machine. Dr. Matriciani can't believe what he's seeing. He's banging his wand on the ultrasound, looking at it, blowing on it, tapping it, putting it back down and looking at the monitor. Sure enough, there's the implant. Everybody's freaked out. Richard and I just start laughing because we know what happened. We know who showed up and broke the power of the dragon, because that's what he does. And so 2 days later, we were at SEAL Lab, the last time I ever saw Dr. Roger Lear alive. I said, Raj, I want to ask you something privately. So we go out in the hallway and I go, Raj, you were there. You saw an actual move in the hands of a believer. When you see God, the real one, really show up and do something, that's like, oh my gosh, what just happened? And I got nothing. It's not me. I got absolutely nothing. But sometimes, not all the time, sometimes he shows up and does stuff for whatever reason. And he showed up that afternoon in that operating theater and had his way.
Did it just happen, or did you feel something?
I felt nothing. Look, I've witnessed him heal people that I've been praying for. I didn't feel doodly squat. It's not about me, it's about him. But all of a sudden someone goes, oh my gosh, and they take off their sling and they go to the doctor, and their doctor goes, well, that's miraculous. Your bones look completely normal. How did that happen? And they just start laughing. So I've experienced it more than once. And, when he shows up, it's a wonderful thing.
All right. Well, I feel like my sense of the spirit of my soul, or whatever it might be, is when I'm able to really clear my mind and sort of get focused and manifest, my goals. It's like I can feel something deep, like happening there that's, I can't feel it, like it's intangible. I can't describe it in those terms, but I get that sense that there's something very mysterious deep within our minds, like you said earlier. And I wonder if sometimes, is that just being confused with God? Like, how do you know when it's your own consciousness versus a higher power?
Well, that's the trick. Remember what I said earlier? You have three different access points. One, your mind, your own thoughts. Two, the thoughts of the dragon, which always come to rob, kill, and destroy. That's how we know his voice. Three, the spirit of the living God. I've had the Lord just tell me straight up, stop what you're doing. I mean, just like that, stop, and I paid the consequences. So there was a learning curve for me, but I learned that when he says, for whatever reason, stop what you're doing, I'm going to stop what I'm doing because he knows more than I do. End of story.
All right. Well, let's leave it right there. L.A., thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Thanks, Alan. It's been a real pleasure.
Absolutely. So everyone out there, let's just let's leave it at, why don't we all try to slay our own dragons? I suppose like St. George did.
There you go.
We'll keep going day in, day out, and do our absolute best. And talking about the paranormal and ufology and metaphysics, for me, is sort of a therapy in its own right. So I hope that for everyone listening tonight, you feel the same way, whether it be this program or other programs or books that you read or programs that you watch. I think exploring these mysteries does help us grow a little bit more. You've been listening to Paranormal Now, broadcasting live on KGRA Radio. Join us next Tuesday, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. KGRA Radio is your official contact for the best in alternative talk radio. To find out more, go to kgraradio.com/paranormalnow, or you can find me on Twitter at paranormal_now. Special thanks to KGRA producer Race Hobbs. Until next time, live in the mystery.
That's the wrong way. Lost in a bad way, starting to let go, gone too far the wrong way, can take it all back now, been lost in a bad way, I've gotta let you go.